we certainly pride ourselves on throwing so many different seeds at the children and sort of seeing what grows. Well, again, well beyond the classroom, whether it's through music, whether it's through drama, whether it's through sport, whether it's through public speaking, debating, plays, all of that is by definition, character building stuff.
That sense of belonging to something bigger is quite intangible, but I think also really grounds children in a way that will help them become really good human beings as they grow up.
If you are kind as an adult and a role model, you are going to feed that into the children, and that's probably the most important life skill there.
Children have to know you're on their side. That is the most important thing.
Hi, I'm Cary, and welcome to the Eat Nourish Love podcast. For over 20 years, I've created events, raised over 4 million for good causes, and been lucky enough to meet some incredible people along the way. This podcast is about exploring stories and insights that really shape us, with inspiring guests from wellness, business, self-care, and personal growth. It's about learning to trust our intuition and discovering what truly matters, and how, with hard work, belief, and tenacity, we can make so many things happen. Matt and Ed, thank you so much. It is extraordinary because there are lots of things that I see that are very common. Obviously, this podcast is all about inspiring, engaging and bringing people together. And it's lovely to be able to bring you together. And thank you so much for your support for the Eat, Nourish, Love Autumn Fair, and particularly our speaker, Lucinda Miller. What's interesting is, I don't know whether you know, but my father was at Blundell's.
Oh, I didn't know that. I did not know that. How interesting.
So Daddy was a great rugby player. He used to play for Moseley. So when I saw that you were leaving Blundell's, I just thought that was quite an interesting,
that's interesting.
Conversation.
When did he leave Blundell's? Do you know?
Oh, a long time ago. I mean, sadly he died about 22 years ago, so a long time ago. So, but Blundell's has always been held very fondly in my heart.
That's a lovely connection to have. Yeah, really nice.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, so schooling and children, what a big decision for her parents. And, we are the other side. We've got grandchildren coming out now, and interesting to see how they are looking at schooling, and obviously particularly with all this changing going on, the 20%, etc. And you both are going to be a bit surprised, but we home educated the children until they were 12. Okay. And then Annabelle till 9. And that was because of the forces, and because I was quite nervous about sending them to boarding school at the age of 7. So that's why I think this is a very interesting conversation, particularly with Hazelgrove and what you stand for and what you do, because one saw a lot of issues going on with military families as well when they're sending their children, and they might have been the only children in the school at that time.
Yeah, I mean, and I speak as a example of someone who was a military child myself. I was sent to full boarding school actually not till the age of 9, in the sort of late 80s. So I know what it was like then. But actually, to give my school its due, and I'm sure plenty of others, and it was actually very local to Hazelgrove, so I knew the Hazelgrove setup as well. It was absolutely outstanding. I would defend your need to have homeschooled on certainly on the experience I had at that stage. And I think it's only got better in terms of the provision and the pastoral care, but that overall sort of outdoorsy ethos, very very broad curriculum that extends well beyond the classroom is what it's all about, and boarding is that sort of final layer that really brings out the character and the confidence in the pupils. So I think if you had young children again, I would be recommending it very very strongly. Put it that way.
That's interesting. So I also boarded at prep school. I had a very different background. I'm not from a military family, but I went to my prep school aged 6, and I only lived 5 miles down the road, and so I was a day pupil. And I remember reaching the age of about 10 and saying to my parents, "Can I board, please?" Because lots of my friends were, but they just seemed to be having the most incredible fun. And so I boarded from, I can't remember exactly, about 10, even though I lived 4 miles down the road. and it was an incredible experience. I look back and it was almost kind of idyllic, playing in the fields and outside, and there's a farm and there are farm animals around. And I would, similarly to Ed, defend that boarding experience. I think the fun and the camaraderie and all the great things are still there, but the pastoral care and the kind of thought that goes behind it is vastly changed since the 80s and early 90s.
Yeah, and I think I think there was, maybe I was a bit of a clingy parent, but I think there was this thing about the boarding school and them going away, and we were in Germany, so we were a bit far away. But I absolutely agree with you, and I think one suddenly learned sort of when they were about 10, you just spotted that they were bored, they needed male mentors, my eldest son dreams of school every single week. He adored school. So there you are. He didn't go to school for a bit, and then so someone said you deprived him for many years.
Yeah, and honestly, I often say to parents, my biggest motivation. I used to like Matt. I used to work in the city, and my genuinely my biggest motivation to leave and qualify to become a teacher was I basically wanted to relive prep school all over again because it was so fun, and I wanted to go and play cricket and play music and enjoy all the great variety that prep school gives you, and actually get paid to do it. I thought it was brilliant. So I'm definitely like your son.
Absolutely, absolutely. So obviously this talk is about confidence, community and character. These are the three C's here, and I think that's a really important thing. So, I think you've also mentioned one of your C's is on another is curiosity, and I'm a great believer in curiosity because I think if you're curious, you want to learn, and it's that teaching. So so let's just go into that title, confidence, community and character, Matt, and how you think that works at schools.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, when Ed and I were discussing the kind of the topics beforehand, I think these really jumped out at us, these words. I've got a couple of thoughts I'll share to kick things off. Confidence for me, it can be a slightly loaded term because I think, we all think of confidence as a positive thing, but too much confidence, you lean to arrogance. But actually, I like to think of confidence slightly differently. And there's a phrase that you sometimes hear in pedagogy and teaching, which is self-efficacy, which sounds slightly jargony, but actually I think it's incredibly powerful because effectively what you want to try and give children is self-efficacy, i.e. give them the knowledge that they can do it, the belief that if they try, that their efforts will be good enough. And I think all research shows, and I see it, anecdotally, I see it in the classroom, I hear people talk about it, it can be transformational in how a pupil thrives in their life. And that's not just in terms of academics, that's in all sorts of facets of their life. If they believe they can do it. This problem is difficult, but I know that my efforts will eventually be sufficient to help me work a way through it. That in some ways, if you see confidence in that way, then you can perhaps see the power from the very young age of helping children grow into young adults, into adults with that type of confidence, and that's powerful. And I think if schools can understand that, but also understand how to develop it and how to build it in pupils, that can be really, really powerful.
And that's that belief, isn't it? I mean, that's a life skill, because I think where schooling's going, and sorry to remember, but I think that's where it's really important that some of these life skills are really brought out even more so within the schooling structure, because it's going to be with us long term. Ed, what were you going to say?
I completely agree, and the reason, one of the real drivers for our 3Cs a couple of years ago was that the recognition that the job market is changing so fast now in terms of the sort of assessment and recruitment process. The days of going to Oxford and Cambridge and getting a 2-1 and walking into a job has now become a much more granular but more personal experience in terms of your teamwork, your problem solving, your creativity, team building, all those kinds of less tangible measures which have to start with things like confidence and curiosity and character. So I think it was sort of linking to that again, that very intangible life skill that we in a good prep school need to start, that a good senior school like King's can then develop, so that it's not just about having grades at the end, it's having far more that will actually take you a lot further.
To build on what Ed said there as well, we're talking now about schools, about children, about young adults, but actually, of course, we know we never lose sight of the fact that you want them to thrive in the world beyond school when they leave, and it's so often the case now that you hear employers say words to the effect of, you hire the person and then you train them in the skills they need. So what they are looking for are characters, and so it's people I know that because this person's got these character traits which I really value, they all thrive in my company, and I don't mind the fact they're not a qualified X or a qualified Y, because I can train them in that on the job, but I'm employing the person. And I think that is what, as Ed was saying, that's what schools, I think, over the last 10 years particularly, there's been a real understanding and awareness of the importance of that.
I think also parents are wising up to that in terms of what is the value out of a school, particularly in such an inflationary environment, and so they're almost, I think they are taking now at a point where they take for granted the academic provision. They probably take for granted the pastoral provision, frankly, and therefore it's actually the extra. It is that intangible character. It is that confidence, because that is what's going to really set their child apart as they grow up. So it's this as a topic, I think, is at the forefront of parents' minds as to what value add really looks like.
And I think the other word that really jumped out at me is this idea of community. I would say, there's lots of really good schools out there, and they do lots of different things. The schools that kind of sing to me are those that are genuine communities and which value the fact that community is part of what they offer, because it's probably slightly cliche, but like all cliches, there's truth in it. If you rewind 50, 70 years, people generally lived and grew up in communities, whether that was a village or like your district of your town or whatever, or your street. You had people around you. You belonged to something that was bigger than just your little unit. We have lost that as a society. Society's changed. It's developed in all sorts of ways. That has broadly gone. You might be lucky and have that lovely village you live in, but for a lot of children, particularly, that doesn't exist as much as it did. And I think if you are a community, a school community, what you deliver to pupils is you deliver the fact they can grow up in an environment where they are, around people who care about them and who look out for them and who they can have fun with together, and they share a set of kind of common goals and common values, and that sense of belonging to something bigger is quite intangible, but I think also really grounds children in a way that will help them become really good human beings as they grow up.
So it's quite interesting, and that's actually the event that we do, the Eat Nourish Love. It's all about community. People say, "Oh, you've done so well." I said, "No, it's the teamwork. It's the community. People come together, and there's never been a more important to actually. People talk about loneliness and isolation, and actually, the way I've built the community is often say, "Can you come and help me do this fundraising project?" And we've built great friendships and huge togetherness through it, and it's built lifelong friendships, and I think that's very much what the military is like as well. My husband was in the forces, and we did many moves, and but those friends are there forever because you live with them intensely for quite a few years, and I think that's what my children took away from boarding school. I wasn't going to send them to boarding school. They all went and they absolutely loved it. So there you go.
Yeah, and I think what we underestimate with prospective parents is that when they bring their child to see a school like Hazelgrove or King's, they're naturally anxious about their child settling in and their child making friends. But actually, I think subconsciously they're really worried about themselves making friends and being part of a community, particularly the military, who are less present. So I think to Matt's point, the more you can welcome them with open arms, the more you can have tangible events that they can attend. And for example, at Hazelgrove, we make sure that our boarding families, we will align any events involving their children, whether it's a play, whether it's a parents' evening, whether it's a concert, we'll align it with our exeats and our half terms, so they are here anyway collecting their child, and they can feel part of it, they can see their child, and they can meet all the other military families. And they really value that, because suddenly they're not some outsider coming down from Andover or from Catterick or from abroad. They actually feel as much as a part of the community as someone who lives 5 minutes away. So it's really important.
It must be a very difficult job. The pace of education, the change of education, AI coming in, some big topics, some things are going to be they're going to change things. I mean, in the next 5 years, very fast, aren't they?
It is challenging. I think it's always challenging because it's children, and there's that combination of children lives can be complex and difficult, but also you kind of care innately about trying to help them and support them. So there's always that added kind of emotional complexity to it as well. To answer your question, Caroline, I think it might be one of the things I feel most strongly about in terms of provision in education is the sense of you are a community, because if you genuinely believe in that, then everything else carries an added resonance. It's not just the class that you're teaching because that's in your timetable. It's these children in front of me. I really care about them doing well, and I'm invested in them. That parents' evening, it's not just something that's in the calendar that I have to do. It's I actually know these parents and I like them and we have a good relationship and I'm trying to work with them to achieve the same goal they want for their children. The friendships you create, the relationships you have between pupils and staff, between parents and pupils, everything is different. Everything is better if you belong to a community. I fundamentally believe that, and I think part of my overarching sense of running schools and leading schools is that you have to be really intentional about what you do. You have to don't just do things because. You have to think about them, understand why you're doing them, and be intentional about how and when and how much you push and how much you pull off. And I think building a sense of community, emphasizing and valuing a sense of community is one of the most important things we can do.
You're also both managing teams and the teachers and the staff, and that is, there's a lot of things involved, aren't there? And they all need to be part of that team and community. So what are the really important things that you need to consider in that situation?
I think it's really important that you are able to listen to their opinions and their views. It often, particularly as a relatively young head like Matt and myself are, you're going to be working alongside staff who've actually taught for a lot longer than you, and are by definition much more experienced than you. And so to really learn from them as to what's worked in the past at your school, but similarly to listen to those younger staff who are by definition coming in with fresher ideas and perhaps more awareness of technological change, and then really being able to kind of balance those two things together. It's interesting. I mean, in terms of the parents, the parents similarly will often send their child to a traditional boarding prep school or senior school because they went, perhaps, or because they very much believe in the sort of academic rigor and the traditional values that the school holds. And those are really important, but one's also trying to ensure that those parents are also looking forwards to perhaps more AI related subjects, or if you take A levels, there's significant shift in demand towards areas like business studies, computer science, psychology versus perhaps modern languages, classics, and it's getting that balance of carrying your staff and your parents with you with those changes, and not getting too stuck in your ways. And it's a difficult task. What's been interesting, though, I think, is the one that we would all agree on that should undoubtedly remain is in our case our no phone policy. And although there is obviously a rapid move technologically going on in the world, what's really heartening is parents, staff, pupils actually, if they really were forced to admit it, are very, very in favour of a phone-free time at school, at least. We talk about the UFO model, which is to look up, look forwards, and look out, and just develop that kind of self-awareness of other people, of yourself, eye contact, conversation, relationships, empathy, all those skills that come about from just not staring at a phone. And that's been the one sort of constant that I think we all agree on, and that's been really heartening. But in other areas, yes, it's about listening, and it's about collaborating with parents, with staff, and ensuring that we're moving in the right direction and keeping with the times.
So the no phone policy, just come into that. So how long? Because some people might say, well, actually, you need to learn these situations with the technology, with the AI. And so it's not, so a lot of people say, oh, I'm coming off social media, it's terrible, I'm going to get rid of the app, I'm going to not use it. And actually, society is moving in a way that we have to bring it in, but we have to know how to use it and have to have control over it, don't we?
Yeah. Yeah, and we're mindful of that. The last thing we want is a 13-year-old to leave Hazelgrove, go on to King's Bruton, and have no exposure whatsoever, and potentially get it very wrong as a result. We're mindful that most of our children will at some point obviously be given a phone by their parents. We always recommend it's not until about 12 or 13 ideally, but in the interim we're still exposing them through, we provide them with iPads from year 6, which they're using in an educational background, into whether it's researching projects, videos, that kind of thing. So they are becoming technology proficient. They're using AI in that sense, and similarly, we're also educating them as to the pitfalls to come of getting it wrong, digital footprint, whether it's sending a message you shouldn't send, sending an image you shouldn't send, or an image of yourself that might come back to bite further down the line, for example, in a job interview. So I think in that sense we hopefully get the right balance, and their eyes are open enough to the challenges out there when they get to senior school, but they are technologically very able, and frankly, and I'm sure Matt would agree, they're well ahead of us in terms of their understanding and knowing what's coming next.
It's interesting. Lots of senior schools have also, and we certainly have made the move to making children hand their phones in during the school day as well. I think for a long time, schools took the view of, we need to help them manage it and learn to use phones and social media in their online lives. I think there is probably a bit of an understanding now that you actually need to be a little bit more controlling of it, because the point I often make to children and their parents is, you have to understand that the social media companies, internet companies, they are behemoths, and they spend literally billions of dollars making themselves addictive for you. And so the fact that 13-year-olds can't control how much time they spend on TikTok shouldn't be a surprise, because it's designed to be addictive. Now, I'm not going to get into the realms of the morality of social media. That's probably for a different podcast. But if we talk about it as people who try and help children grow up and develop and grow as people, I do think I'm not a rule maker. I'm not a kind of draconian person by instinct. I think there's something different with social media and internet lives, because I think it is, adults find it hard, impossible. Adults get addicted, and we have to help children here. So I think there is a balance, because you do need to help them get used to it and manage it themselves. My sense is that once children get to 15, 16, their brains have developed more, they are more aware, they are more capable of managing that, but you have to help them along the way, slowly and gently. There was a book that came out last year called The Anxious Generation. It was quite successful. I think it was a kind of bestseller. It was a really interesting book, but one of the author Jonathan Haidt's main contentions is that we've massively under-regulated children's online lives, whilst simultaneously over-regulating their in real life activity, so playtime outside and those kind of things. And actually, we need to reverse those. And so, we'll probably come to that when it comes to later on in the pod about various conversations. But to me, I think that's what schools can really do and what they can bring to children.
Definitely. I'd agree with that. And I speak as a parent of an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old. We have really tried to get that balance that you've described, Matt, in the right place. We didn't give them a phone until they were 13. They've gone to a senior school that has, good strict rules about phone usage. We have strict phone usage rules at home as well. And then meanwhile, we are trying to get them to see the bigger world that's around them, as are their school. And I would hope, and obviously I'm very biased as a parent, but they are, as you say, coming out at 16 in that more prepared, more mature stage, I think in a much better place.
So it is quite interesting, isn't it? Because I think our children just slightly missed it. They're a little bit older, but I can see that I can see the youngsters. They're absolutely fascinated. As soon as phone's there, they've gone. It's quite interesting. We talk about shaping character. So how do you see shaping character within the school? is how do you go about that?
I think the first thing I would say about that is you have to be explicit about it. You have to talk about it. One of the things, if you want to bring about culture change or affect a culture, you need to be explicit about what that means and what that looks like. I think we were talking a while earlier about staff and parents and bringing them with you. There's that. That sense that people have to understand why they're doing something, and if they understand and are happy with why it's being done, then they'll do whatever it takes to get there. And so what you have to do is you have to explain to people, you have to be clear about why character matters and what we expect from people to show that they are taking that seriously. And so I think it sounds slightly kind of trite, but talking about it, showing that you value it, being explicit, having a shared language that you refer to, and that emphasizing when things go well that you're pleased for that reason. When things don't go well, what aspect of that have you let down? And so people start to grow into this shared framework where character is something that is just spoken about and emphasized all the time.
I think also it a lot of what you described earlier on, Matt, about confidence, I'd say they pretty much go hand in hand. I mean, in many ways, they mean the same thing. In that, I think character is that sort of understated confidence. It's not the arrogant confidence, but it's that inner confidence, that almost that sort of twinkle in your eye. And I think certainly any good prep school and absolutely senior school develops that through just the sheer array of opportunity. We certainly pride ourselves on throwing so many different seeds at the children and sort of seeing what grows. Well, again, well beyond the classroom, whether it's through music, whether it's through drama, whether it's through sport, whether it's through public speaking, debating, plays, all of that is by definition, character building stuff, in that it's in tandem with their own sense of worth and confidence. And I think also things like going away. We'll do residential trips for year 5, 6, and 7 and 8, and often you hear teachers and parents say that they almost come back a foot taller when they come back to school a week later. And again, I would say it, wouldn't I? But I think boarding is an extension of that. Boarding is undoubtedly character building stuff. You are learning a huge amount about yourself, your community, your independence, your resilience, and frankly, that all points to character as well. So,
if I can jump in on the boarding point as well, I completely agree, and I often talk to parents about boarding, and I say one of the things that you don't really think about when you think of boarding is the myriad social skills that children are picking up by living in a boarding environment. You're learning things like getting on with other people, how to interact with people who you are friendly with but not great friends with, how to deal with conflict, how to manage fallings out, how to talk to adults, how to deal with little problems that you need to resolve yourself. Children are doing that, many, many times a day, probably without even realizing. And they are building skills, social skills that will stand them in really, really good stead in later life. And just picking that point on character a little further, I often say to pupils, it doesn't really matter what values you have that are important to you, but you need to have them. You need to know what you stand for. You need to know what kind of person you're going to be. And like I say, I don't really mind what you choose. What is important to you, a value that will matter to you, will be different to the person next to you. But the fact that you have them is what matters. Because if you want to be a person of character, someone who wants to go and make a difference in the world, someone who wants to go and try and do the right thing, then you need to have a set of values that you understand, and that will take time. But again, talking about the school setting, you have assemblies or chapel talks, conversations with your Housemaster, where we talk about those things. You use values and you talk about kindness or inclusivity, or you talk about resilience or resourcefulness or being curious, and you talk about those things and you make it clear that they're important and you value them, and you can unpack why that is. And over time, there's just that general atmosphere where that is something children pick up and hear a lot, and that will in turn allow themselves to make their own decisions about the human being they want to be.
That's phenomenal. It's so lovely to hear this, because actually it's allowing them time to understand who they are. And one of the problems we have in society is that people are sort of saying, what's my purpose? Who am I? And as they're getting older, they're trying to find. They say, well, I still don't know my purpose, and I'm 70 years old, or I'm 80 years old. And actually, but I think our purpose and who we are evolves anyway as we grow older, because things change and our life experiences change with us. I always remember when it's quite interesting, as a parent who didn't go to boarding school, whose parents did go to boarding school, my husband went to boarding school, I was always like a little bit nervous about it. And then having got 3 children who went to boarding school, who I'm very proud of them, they've come out. But I always remember when the headmaster of the school they went to, a headmaster was called Tom Ware, and he always said that people always said, oh, have you had the flower bed story or the casserole story? And that what he used to say is we plant the seeds, we give them the water and the sunshine, and we allow them to be who they are, and their characters come out. So whether it be a sunflower, a rose, or whatever, and it was either that or the casserole one. So it was a great analogy, and that meant that sat with me so clearly as a parent, particularly having had them at home. I wanted these children to be who they were, and I do believe they do know who they are.
No, Caroline, you're absolutely right. I think it's a really good analogy, and I use a very similar cliche about sowing the seeds and throwing. Sowing multiple seeds at the children and almost sort of seeing which one grows the brightest, and therefore what they're learning about themselves and what they then take with them to senior school and feel really passionate about, it is invaluable. And the broader the spread of seeds, the better, frankly.
So I'd just like to come on, because obviously, we're talking about Hazelgrove and King's Bruton, but, there are subject matters that go across all the schools. And I think this other one, which I want to bring up, we've touched on it very slightly, is AI and how we manage that with because, I use it all the time, and I want to know more about it, but I use it as a tool to help me as opposed to take over what I'm doing. So I might create something and then ask it to correct it, but then I'll take out any stuff that they've put in that I don't like. So how is AI going to change the face of education and schools?
That's the $64,000 question, isn't it? I think that someone once said to me recently, AI at the moment is the worst it will ever be. And it's worth bearing that in mind, because it's getting better all the time. And so I think anyone who stands up and confidently tells you what it will be and the impact it will have isn't telling the truth, because they don't know. We don't know. I think there are certain, as I've been thinking about this and going to conferences and talking to people, more and more, I think the schools that handle AI well will be the ones that are really clear that AI doesn't change what we do, in the sense that we have to know what our principles are, what our values are, what we want to achieve as a school, and then we work out how AI can support us in doing that. I think because it's this new, shiny, exciting tool, that there is an understandable, at the moment, I think, sense of, let's try this, and that's fun, and that's a good bit of software, and that's clever. And you want to try things out, but actually what we need to then do is take a step back and say, okay, we're still a school that educates children. I can categorically tell you that AI won't replace teachers. You need human beings to be the fundamental primary source of education for children. That won't change, but schools that manage it really well will utilize AI to support the people, the teachers, the adults in doing that. So I think, as you can probably tell, I don't have a clear answer in terms of what it will look like, but I'm really confident that it's AI supporting schools, not schools that are run by AI.
I would completely agree with that, Matt. And obviously, my age group is younger and therefore has to be kind of treated possibly more sensitively. But as someone said to me, we've actually been using AI for years, even with sort of basic Google search engines. So it's actually in that sense nothing particularly new. And I think I really had my eyes opened. I still teach maths, and I asked my year seven class to do a project recently where they'd all run 100 meters. We'd measured times, and then I was asking them to collate the data, work out the average, look for some interesting facts, and turn it into a nice WYSI presentation. And I said, look, you're welcome to use a poster. You've got some A3 paper here. You can use PowerPoint if you want. And every single group used Canva, and Canva is essentially a much smarter, more advanced AI-driven form of PowerPoint. And so when I said, right, guys, what's it going to be, poster or PowerPoint? They looked at me as if I was a complete moron, and said, well, we're using Canva, sir. And that had been driven as an initiative across the school, but it was a very well managed means of putting together a presentation that was still ultimately being driven by your thought process and not a robot's. So I think to Matt's point, it was an example where we're still in charge of what the education is, but that's where AI is a very useful layer to make it just look better. And as long as it's that way round, and you're not letting AI start the process, then that's, I think, where we need to be, morally and professionally.
I think someone once said, but AI is trained because it's learning data, so it's picking up everything else, but it doesn't have the blank piece of paper. So as long as we've got the blank piece of paper and we have the vision, that's where we're always going to be ahead. So we're always going to have humans because AI is trained by humans. I mean, I say that because things could change, and who do we know? It's just a new thing, isn't it, in our lives? I'd like to go on to sport really within schools and physical exercise, because I think that's a really big one. I think, as we know, that we are challenged hugely with obesity and children not moving and being in front of their phones and everything they got them. But sport is so important. But also, there's changing in sport, isn't there? There's change for rugby and how that's going to pan out over the years. So, just talk to me about how you deal with sport and how sport comes into the schools.
I mentioned earlier the book Anxious Generation, and this sense that we need to let children be children in real life, outside and play outside. And I think sport sits centrally in that kind of larger thesis. We need to give children the opportunity to play. And I'll use play in a very, very loose sense, because playing when you're 4 is very different to playing when you're 17, but the central point is the same. Sport specifically gives so much, and I think when schools do sport well, it's that they allow the children, whatever their level of sporting engagement or interest, to access all the benefits that it brings. So if you are a top level elite sportswoman or sportsman, then playing at that top level, achieving, being in a team, getting better, developing as a player, gives you real satisfaction, growth, nourishment, all those things. But if you are 13 or 9 and you're not particularly talented from a sporting perspective, you can still play in a team and have real fun with your friends, learn some new skills, get fresh air, feel achievements when you score the goal or make a personal best in the sprinting race, or whatever it might be. So you're getting exactly the same benefits from the sport. You're just playing it at a different level, and I think that's difficult for schools to manage. Of course it is, because you have the top level teams being coached by the same people who might be teaching maths that afternoon, or then they have to provide a whole range of provisions and sports and levels of training. So I don't underestimate the challenge, but I think certainly schools that I've worked in, they manage that really well, and it brings untold benefits to the pupils. But it's the recognition of what sport brings, not necessarily how good is our under 16A rugby team.
It doesn't that start really from your point of view, Ed? Because as if they start young and start enjoying it and have those techniques that as they grow older and go to secondary school, it's sort of slightly embedded in them. So it's not they have got used to sport and they enjoy being sportive.
Absolutely, and surely there are a few better examples of what generates confidence, community, and character than sports. I mean, it ticks every box. And as Matt says, even if you're not an outstanding rugby player, you can gain real enjoyment out of being in the under 12Bs or playing in the touch rugby or one evening with the Borders. If you're doing your job properly as a good sporty school, you're not just nurturing the elite. You are making it accessible to all. And I think again it goes back to my point about where's the value add for parents. Certainly our parents, again, they're taking the academics for granted. It's the other stuff, and sport is very much up there. We always pride ourselves on the timetable where every day you are going to be doing something active, whether it's a class swimming lesson, whether it's a PE lesson, whether it's a game session, whether it's a match, whether it's just an activity one evening out on the golf course or playing tennis, or you should, for all good health and physical and mental health reasons, be doing something physical every day, and a good school does that, and then with the end result being an improvement in confidence, community, and character. So absolutely, it's a win-win, and it doesn't have to just be about, as Matt says, about being in the A team. It should be accessible to all.
If I can broaden that out, Caroline, as well, I was thinking about when I was thinking about this podcast and the various questions. I was thinking about a pupil from when I was a housemaster. And he's probably now about 27, but I can remember him joining the school as a 13-year-old. He's actually an expat family. They lived in Singapore, came to boarding school in the UK, and 4-5 weeks in, he was really struggling to fit in. He didn't really make any good friends. He didn't really find he had his place quite yet. And then at the end of that first term, he appeared as one of the characters in the school production. It was a Midsummer Night's Dream, a Shakespeare production, and he was a comic character. I think it's Bottom or Puck. I can't remember which one it was. And he was a revelation. I mean, he stole the show. He was so good, and he had 3 nights of kind of rapturous applause, and all his people come up to him asking, "Oh God, you're so good at that. It was amazing." And it was like he changed overnight. He found that he loved theatre, so he found his group of friends. He had that inner confidence in himself. Oh, I can do things. I can do this. And he just flew, and he ended up being head boy. And my last speech day at that school, he was the head boy giving the speech, and it was lovely. And that's one example I can think of straight up from the top of my head about Alex, about him, and the way in which finding his thing, which was drama rather than sport, but it's the same point, really allowed him to find himself and know who he was and develop that self-efficacy, that confidence, and he became a really wonderful young man.
That's extraordinary, isn't it? That must be so rewarding, because there must be times when it is difficult, but when you see things happen like that. Actually, it was my daughter who joined school quite late, because in year 9, and I probably didn't quite give her the tutoring probably that the boys got before she went into school, so she was quite raw. So she did go into a lot of the sort of classes to bring her up to speed, and she won the most I can't remember what cup it was, but the sort of the most improved determined child, and it was just wonderful to see that school had picked her up and done all those things with her. So I want to talk a little bit about the sort of foundation and everything else that you set up, but just before I go on, this is also quite an interesting subject for me, because obviously in the world that I'm in, and I've been in catering, and I've trained at Prue Leiths with but food. Food has become an issue. People have got all these different allergies and various other things. Again, so how do you deal with that sort of side in school? Because it's another big topic, isn't it?
Food, yeah. Ed, why don't you start with the because
yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. Gosh, and in my tenure in teaching, or even in the last few years as a head, you're right, it's changed so fast, and you look in the catering manager's office of the different allergies and sort of posters of each child. It's amazing how just even in that time how much it's grown. You have to be very hot on it, and they do a brilliant job, but I think it's probably helped by the fact that there is now so much choice, compared to the dark days of the 80s and 90s, where you just got what you were given, and it was sort of slopped onto a plate, and you were forced to eat it. We are so accommodating now, and there is so much choice, whether it's hot, cold, vegetarian, fruit, hot pudding, cold pudding. I think we've certainly helped ease that pain of allergy, and you've got a very diligent team who are on top of it.
And I think as well, the other side of it is that children, especially teenagers, are very, very conscious of what they eat nowadays. And that might be because it's just for health reasons. They might be really into their sport, and so it's about sports development and nutrition. So on top of all of those, the allergies and things, you also have to be alert to the fact that children are very savvy about the food they eat. And so you can't just whack down last night's cottage pie because you need to use it up. It has to be thought through. It has to be balanced. But what I will say is two things. One, the schools spend a lot of money on food. It's a major line in the budget, and rightly so. And I think that'll be any school will say that. But the catering teams, what they do is extraordinary, genuinely extraordinary. I mean, I can't cook to save my life, but they are. They'll churn out 500 meals 3 times a day, and then they'll be doing a kind of posh black tie function at the same time. They'll be doing match teas over at the pavilion, just managing all of these moving parts and making it tasty and varied and healthy and nutritious. And I'm regularly blown away by the quality of the catering provision in schools.
But I think it's lovely to hear that, because obviously that's the world I've been in as well, and and I have to do my health and safety and allergen test, and you can't think, good, is that an allergen now? That's another one that's popped up here, and so it's very thorough. But also, you can't cook with the same boards and knives, and everything has to be spaced. So it's a huge operation, as you say. Bringing the churning that sort of numbers of meals out, and I think they need to be very well recognised for what they do. And obviously it was you sponsoring Lucinda's talk, which is and I'm looking forward to you meeting her, Nature Doc, and she's written 3 brilliant books, and one is I Can't Believe It's Baby Food, which my children all use. It's extraordinary what she's done and how she's helped with so many people with various things. So could I just come on a little bit to understand, you now are a foundation as 2 schools. What does that mean, and how did that come around?
Well, it's been like that for the last 500 years. It was founded in the 1500s as a foundation, as a senior and a prep school, and over the years it's obviously evolved and grown, and more recently, well, I say recently, after the Second World War, the prep school component moved from the same site in Bruton out to where we are now, near Sparkford, but we've maintained that foundation setup, and what that really means is we share the same governing body. We contribute, Matt and I, our financial contribution from each school to the foundation, from which we then draw where the priorities lie in terms of investment. So it's quite a unique setup in that we're not like a traditional through school whereby all of my pupils will go on to King's Bruton. We actually have a rather unique setup where parents will choose to have that through school experience, or they might actually choose to go through to 13 at Hazelgrove and then choose a different school for whatever reason. So it enables us to have a lovely through school experience, shared values, shared brand, from a financial perspective, shared costs through areas like bursary, HR, maintenance, grounds, things like that. But at the same time have our own unique story to tell as well. So in that sense, we're really sort of 3 pillars. We're Hazelgrove, Kings Bruton, and the foundation.
And I think if we're going to look parents in the eyes and say we want what's best for your child, then I think that ability for Ed to say to families, actually, I think this is the right school for you, and it's not Kings Bruton. That's really important, because we have to. We're always. You have to say to yourself, what's the right thing for the child? That has to be your starting point. I certainly hope that for a good number, a majority, it will be Kings Bruton, because I'm really proud of the school. I think it's a fantastic school, but my point still stands, and I believe that firmly. I will say, just to add to Ed's initial point, that the original Hazelgrove building is still on the Kings Bruton site. We have the original school building from 1519, which is still in use to this day on our site, and the original Hazelgrove, the junior section building, is still on our site and still in use. So for me, I was trained as a history teacher. When I kind of went back to the university to do my PGC, I taught history, and so for me, belonging to an institution that is over half a millennium old is really quite something, and we have the physical proof.
And then obviously, with this, and again, I don't want to labour it because it's been in the news for so long, but it's obviously something that people are aware of, the 20% on school fees and how it's affected recruitment and things like that. Has that been pretty tough?
Yeah, it has been tough, but ultimately you have to, my message to staff and to parents has been, quality, quality, quality. You have to keep doing all of the things we've discussed in this podcast as well as you possibly can, to ensure that you are still offering value for money. You have to, and again, aided by being in a foundation, we can be more cost efficient. We can be more competitive on price, which I think has definitely helped. So versus a lot of our prep and senior school competitors, we are more affordable. So I think in that sense, that's definitely taken the edge off recruitment. But yet you are having to work very, very hard, undoubtedly. Marketing wise, that's going to become increasingly important, a focus. But as I said, ultimately it's quality of your product and all of those values and those three C's that are becoming more and more important. I think the other flip side is that a lot of, certainly in my case, a lot of the local primary schools, as a result of this government change, are now becoming overwhelmed and classes are very large, and actually therefore parents are thinking, well, I'm gonna make the sacrifice. I'm gonna make it work because I want my child to be in this kind of environment with smaller classes and really make much more tangible progress. So time will tell, but yeah, you're having to pedal hard.
I think Ed's absolutely right. It is tough. It is tough out there. I think we're very fortunate that the foundation's been very well run for a long time. It's very, very strong and secure financially, and so we can push that message of saying, just keep being excellent, because what parents parents are very, very sophisticated. They know what their market, they know what they're looking for their child. They'll be asking themselves broadly two questions: is private education still worth it, and if so, which is the right school for my child? And so we have to keep being excellent, keep pushing the quality, because we want parents to say, yes, independent schools are still worth it. And secondly, Hazelgrove and King's Bruton are the schools for my child. And so you have to be really sharp. You have to know what you offer. You have to be very, very clear on who you are, what your place in the market is and your offering, and it has to be exceptionally good.
Yeah, and I think that it's what you're helping children in your going through the schools is to understand who they are, and I think and parents are very key to that. I do remember we were going to send our daughter, to another school, and there was a conversation where she was coming back from the school the boys were at, and she just said, I so wish I was going to that school, Mummy. And as a parent, it just went straight in here, and I went, crumbs. So I went straight down and saw the headmistress that day and the next day, and I said, I think I might be making a big mistake. Can you help me? I'm not sure. Can you help me with the pastoral care, because I didn't go to boarding school. I was a young girl at boarding school, and I'm concerned about my daughter going to a boarding school. And we had the conversation, and a few weeks later she went to the school, and it was one of the best decisions I ever made. So I think it's actually just understanding and hearing your children as well as parents, as well as teachers, and you'll know the right school if you really follow that, I think. And I think we're very lucky to have schools and all the work that you do, and I think it's extraordinary, and it is where great futures begin, and I think that's really, really important. I could talk to you both for hours. I know we're going to meet and at the Eton Irish Love Autumn Fair on the 23rd and 24th of September, and you're kindly going to sponsor Lucinda Miller's talk, and that's fantastic. But I'd like you to leave our listeners with 3 things that you think are very key to you in your worlds, because we're all about I'm about the power of 3: inspire, engage, bring people together. And this podcast is all about belief, hard work and tenacity can make many things happen. So Matt, why don't we start with you?
I think, yeah, I mean, it's a great question. It's like a daunting one to try and distill how I approach things. For me, I think as an educator, my number one fundamental central belief is that children have to know you're on their side. That is the most important thing, and it applies to all aspects of their childhood. If you're a classroom teacher and you're trying to help a child get to the solution or finish the essay, if that child knows that you want them to do well and that you care about them doing well and you believe in them, that will fundamentally transform how they feel about things. And you can apply that scenario to anything in their life. So number one, the children have to know you believe in them and that you care about them and you want them to succeed. I believe number two, about the importance of having strong personal values, being a good person, being a good human being, and knowing who you are and what you stand for. And I believe in the importance of community. We are not a school, we are a community that educates children, and we do it together. And if we are a good, strong community, we are so much greater than the sum of our parts.
Annoyingly, I kind of agree. I certainly, with Matt's first point, I think about understanding the child, not only that they know you're with them, but really getting to see, working out what makes them tick, and that can take time and a lot of patience. So patience in you and in your staff body is absolutely crucial, because gosh, it pays back. I think secondly, on values, I mean, every school has them, and they're critical. We always talk about kindness being the most important one, and I think if you are kind as an adult and a role model, you are going to feed that into the children, and that's probably the most important life skill there. And I think, again, as Matt says, I think hard work, teaching is very, very hard work, but thankfully with that, it sets a great example to the children. And the more you can open their eyes that hard work is really worth it, it really pays dividends, and the sooner you can get that into their mindset, the better. And then they really are prepared for the working world when they leave school.
Oh, well, what amazing tips. And my one I'd leave at the end of this one is also, it's come across almost every single podcast, is curiosity, and I think you both covered that as well. It's something, and I just realised that one of the things that I love and the way I keep learning is being curious and having a go at it and never being too frightened to fail. So but both, thank you both so much. And we'll leave all your details of where you are and how people can get hold of you at the end of in our show notes at the bottom. But I'm so grateful for your time, and again, thank you for your support. And I look forward to meeting you in person very soon.
Thank you very much.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you.